stand on protocol previously established. I have the honor of presenting or giving the feature speech this morning. Having looked across this room and see the caliber of attendees, especially the Minister, the Honorable Brian Manning, Mr. Kumar Singh, I'm sure there is far more better person in this room to give this feature address this morning than I am. Perhaps I am with a very important institution in the region, the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. So what, I'm going to apologize. I have several different, diverse viewpoints, 4 broad areas I want to touch on this morning. And hopefully I'm going to bring my message back to our central point, what this conference is, and the discussion over the next 2 days. So just bear with me. I'm not one to take time to write speech, so I took the time this morning to put down these few points. And I hope my message will be clear, precise, and be able to generate further discussions over the next 2 days. So I'm going to start with the issue of challenges with respect to green finance and the development of green markets, which include green infrastructure assets. I think that I will start and say that there's an urgent need for us to reshape our thinking or theoretical construct about climate science and climate finance. Until recently, very recently, this whole issue of carbon pricing, carbon market, carbon credits, carbon tax, carbon tariffs, only now people recognizing the importance of climate change and climate consideration and the impact it has on economic systems, socio-economic conditions. But until recently, climate and climate-related costs would not factor into mainstream finance, and definitely not the production cost of goods and services. Emissions were viewed as negative externalities for those who have done production theory. Basic microeconomics 101, emissions are negative externalities and need to be addressed because it generates social costs. So emissions were viewed as negative externalities addressed by social tax, well, primarily social tax. And the tax applied to emissions theoretically is equal to the rate set, equal to the marginal social cost of socially efficient levels of emissions. And that was the attempt to equalize, I use the word equalize, the cost of producing green goods and services and brown assets, so people could make better investment decisions. Right? Such approach was not effective, and obviously, for various reasons, had disproportionate larger impact on some sectors and others. And if we take the emergence of carbon tariff, especially European carbon border adjustment tax that they are rolling out to equalize the cost of the production of green and brown assets, both within the jurisdiction and those coming from outside the jurisdiction. You see that going to have a disproportionate larger impacts on emerging markets, and in particular, very in particular, Caribbean economy states, because we have very heavily weighted carbon sectors, which are the largest employers, as well as generate sizable government revenues. So we have to take account of those debates. This current rationale for carbon tax, carbon tariffs, That underlines this global trust with regards to carbon tax and carbon markets and carbon credits and everything. So applying these things, the expectation is that carbon tax and carbon tariffs will equalize the production cost of green and brown assets, facilitating improved decision-making with respect to climate change considerations. The problem with that approach is that climate science is highly uncertain and climate data limitations prevent or hinder a reliable estimate of the true carbon tax to apply to brown assets and brown activities. For climate science and markets to advance smoothly and be durable, we need to better represent the risk and return space for assets by incorporating climate risk factors and premiums more appropriately, recognizing the longer time horizon over which these values are expected to materialize or crystallize. Transition risks and even fiscal risks, both acute and chronic, due to their slow cascading effects, are long-term in nature compared to traditional risks, market, credit, and operational risks. So a typical investor, let's look at a typical investor. A typical rational investor constructing a portfolio today will more than likely has a sizable weighting to brown rather than green assets, because the risk construct, how we translate the climate risk into our risks and returns, is not properly recognizing the different time horizon in which these risks materialize. What needs to be done to really push climate finance? One, climate finance needs to improve to reduce the current level of uncertainty with respect to the evolution and timing of climate risks, both transition and fiscal. This needs to be supported by an appropriate taxonomy. I think the minister talks about taxonomy is very important for clear transparency, very important for pricing, and very important for calibration of risk or estimation of risk, climate change risk. This needs to be supported by an appropriate taxonomy for climate activities and improvement in climate data. These three ingredients will improve the specification of risk and return functions for climate assets and support, and hopefully, fair pricing and evaluation. Now, that only somewhat solves our problem. The other challenge is one subjective time preference. When people make decision on whether to consume now or save for a later date to consume, typically the time horizon is 1 to 5 years. And if you recall, I indicate that climate risk is likely to materialize at a time horizon greater than that 1 to 5 years. So what we need to do, we need to alter person's subjective time preference. And the question is how we go about doing that. Right? So how do we start to alter one's subjective time preference in order to increase consideration to climate investment? We need to do three things very well, and we need to perfect them. One, climate awareness and education. Two, climate data reporting and disclosure. And three, we need to demonstrate effective leadership and advocacy on pushing climate agenda. We need leadership and firm commitment in that area. Where does the central bank fit into all of this? Well, actually, I should start off this morning and saying the views are those of mine and not the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, but I'm going to say it now. So let's take note of that, right? The views are mine and not necessarily those of the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago. But what I will say that the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, as well as our regional colleagues, all our regional central bank, we recognize the importance of climate change. And we are moving very aggressively to incorporate climate change and climate change consideration into our core areas. And the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, our last strategic plan, that is current strategic plan, recognize that and has that as a critical strategic areas. And if Mr. Kumar was saying, we had a lot of conversation over the last 3 years, so what I'm going to say here will not be new to you. So the global central banking community, through the Network for Greening the Financial System, commit to a net zero pledge, that is ensuring climate change and climate-related risks do not adversely impact on financial stability and, by extension, sustainable growth. The Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago is an active member of the network, and we subscribe to its core principle. Our strategic plan, our current strategic plan, has a key project that involves incorporating climate change consideration into our core areas: monetary policy, financial stability, and internal operations. To support our net zero central banking pledge, the bank underpin that pledge with a climate change corporate governance framework, which I oversee and chair that internal climate change committee. We have gone and we have measured our carbon footprint and reported base year and current year estimate to staff since 2022. We hope in due course to disclose to the general public where we sit or rest with regards to our carbon footprint. Given that we are talking about at least the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, because one of our key principles and goals is to achieve net zero central banking. It's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult. And we mightn't be able to achieve all the offsets within our operations. But through our network of suppliers, we hope to achieve carbon offsets. And by way of supporting green finance as well as getting offsets to reduce our carbon footprint, we have undertaken green investing. So we have incorporated climate change consideration into our procurement activities and work environment. We want to achieve a climate resilient bank, both operations and infrastructure. Currently, we are fine-tuning our climate action plan, noting, and we're going to be explicit with respect to performance target at relevant future time points. So we're going to see how we're going to proceed. We're going to set up that reporting framework, and hopefully, once we have that internal discussions, I think we have undertaken an internal audit of our carbon measurement methodology and estimates. We have gotten some external advisory from the EMA as well as Mr. Kumar Singh as a guide us along over the last 2 years in setting up this entire framework of the Central Bank. We have also invested a portion of the country reserve in green bonds, I think at about 3%. And we hope that once that green space develop, with, as someone mentioned, the integrity of the green space, fair valuation, fair pricing, as well as the necessary risk mechanism, and surely we're going to invest a bit more. To support our initiative to greening the financial system, to reduce, if not eliminate, climate risk to financial stability, we are working with our regional colleagues, central banks, on the following. One, We are working to improve regional climate data to support net zero central banking in the region. 2, developing a consistent regional climate taxonomy to facilitate development of green instruments and markets. And this hopefully will enhance the transparency, pricing, and risk management, including climate risk pricing. We hope to conduct, and we will be coordinating in undertaking a climate assessment of the regional financial system in the near future. At the November meeting of the governors that was held in Barbados, the regional governors reaffirmed the commitments, and they approved a cross-regional central bank working group on climate change and climate risk. And they approve a work program and a budget to undertake those activities. Domestically, I will say the central bank, well, I will say, I have taken note, and also the central bank, broadly, I have taken note of local financial institution activities in sustainability and green finance. And I shall also include non-financial institutions, because NGC, when we was looking at designing and built out our climate framework at the bank, we rely on some of the, and take notes of some of the activities that NGC is doing, which is very important. I must admit what they have done, and what they have done since started this program to now is impressive. I am impressed by the quality of the work and some of the initiatives that they are taking. But I must also recognize a few financial institutions that is, at least getting into this space on the issue of sustainability and green finance. I am pleased of these activities because they augur well for our future banking system in terms of climate resilience and support of our future engagement with licensed financial entities on climate risk and the issue of stability. Let me just close with the macro climate environment. Global climate consideration will be pared back. It's likely there will be some pullback in the near term as we pause to assess the new US administration policies with respect to climate change and climate risk. I note the US Federal Reserve last Friday took the decision to withdraw from the network for greening of the financial system. In the last 2 days, President Trump has frozen roughly $300 billion funding for green infrastructure. And I'm certain in the near future, the Securities and Exchange Commission of the United States is likely to withdraw the climate reporting framework in similar fashion. And also, US banks and firms without a clear directions on this issue of climate consideration in the United States is likely to reduce the present in the green space. Right. But having said that, and recognize those recent developments, I am of the firm view that the green space, green instruments, green markets, green infrastructure are necessary and are still viable options. With respect to, let me summarize some broad policy consideration, and it's related to the issue of climate and economic development. I think we can all agree that the region recognizing the importance of the carbon sector to almost everything, our way of life, social economic stability. Need to, despite the recent development, need to press ahead to becoming more self-reliant with respect to addressing climate considerations and costs, and remain resolute in the face of potential carbon tariff and climate uncertainty. I'm just going to summarize 4 broad policy considerations that I think will assist in the development of green markets and space in the region. 1, I think this is important from the policy's perspective to consolidate and expand climate-relevant economic development programs, and this includes energy transition and economic diversification. 2, ensure that sustainability criteria are adequately weighted into private sector and public sector projects, and I will argue that we should be talking at some point greening physical expenditure. I think a sizable investment into our public infrastructure in Trinidad is undertaken by the government. And so I'm hoping that consideration at some point will be given to greening physical expenditure. So we have to ensure that sustainability criteria are adequately weighted into private sector and public sector projects and programs. 3, very important, a well-articulated national climate policy that will influence, if not promote, strategic investment in climate mitigation and adaptation, and influence climate-sensitive policies. 4, we need to achieve scale. So achieve scale by consolidating intergovernmental or across the region climate-relevant developments efforts, and this will facilitate a larger geographical space for green finance to operate, providing long-term capital, drawing in long-term capital from outside of the region, and this will facilitate reducing costs and improving climate benefits and accelerating sustainable growth. And finally, with scale, once we achieve an adequate scale, we might be able to mobilize regional savings that is much needed for funding low carbon transitioning for sustainable growth. Let me just take this opportunity to wish all participants over the next 2 days a very productive discussion on the issue of green financing. I hope that my points that were discussed provided or give justice to this conference. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning and thank you.